So this is the next module 1.4, and it talks about a wealth of different things. Again, we're at a high level, and at this stage, we're talking about the number of forces that impact learning. Now, obviously, economics do. We just went through COVID, and in many regards, COVID drove folks to learn more, to be trained more, to expand the base of training. In other areas, because the economics where the companies had a shortfall on sales, they didn't have the money to do that. So it brought them to step away from training in that regard. So the economic cycles, and that's an example of COVID, but the economic cycles will directly determine the degree of training that you're going to be able to do. Globalization, as we continue to expand from a global standpoint in businesses, both international business as well as companies on different forefronts, that will tend to drive training from one degree or another. Intangible assets and human capital, what the value of that is. Obviously, and I'll refer to COVID again, COVID refocused that conversation on intangible assets and human capital. Focus on the links to business strategy. One of the key components that you're going to go through shortly will be the selecting a company and then going through analyzing the mission and vision and of the company and where are their gaps. And are there gaps? The gaps that are there, are they there that can be addressed through training or not? So at that stage, then you're going to find the gaps that can be addressed through training, and then we're going to go through and design a training program. That's what your final project is. And we'll spend a lot of time talking about that. But that link to business strategy is critical. It may be that you're looking at new technologies or a new product, so you need to back in from a training and development standpoint to retrain your employees on how to use the new tools. So something to think about. Generational differences. We're in an age where we have 4 generations out in the workforce, and how you deal with the different generations. We're going to spend one evening on talking about generations and how they address that, but that directly impacts learning. Talent management, customer service, new technologies. We've touched on a lot of those, but they all relate to how you look at training and from a company standpoint, the drivers of that training. From an economic standpoint, we talked about the current economy. We talked about high performance. These slides are emphasizing some of the other things that we've talked about, but it gives you more detail to think about as from what I has already spoken about. So we have that. We have globalization and employers that are filling highly skilled and low skilled jobs, and how you go about doing that and what training is required. If you're offshoring a lot of your products, do you have training needs that are remote for a foreign country where the products are being developed or manufactured? Increased value on intangible assets. We talked about that, and direct and indirect influences of these types of capital expenditures. When you think of capital as being intellectual capital, human capital, customer capital. So you need to think about those and understand that. Business strategies. We talked about companies or strategic training. One size, and I guess the big thing to emphasize, and I've already spoke about it a little bit, is that one size does not fit all companies. You need to be very directed and forethought of what you're doing in that regard. Demographics and workforce, it's changing on a routine basis. It's changing on a continual basis from that standpoint. Generations, the millennials, that whole skill set. And, I was speaking with somebody the other day, and he said, there's a gentleman that I know who's 72 years old and working full time. Why does he want to work full time? Why can't he just retire? And when we talk about generations, we're going to have to talk about that whole transition and life changes and what the implications of those life changes are. Talent management, we've talked about, but it's acquiring the assets and the employees that you need, and then designing the training and learning development programs and performance management systems that will compensate the employees appropriately for what the wants and needs are. And then talent management ties into the same thing. We're not isolated. Training is no longer an isolated function. It's incorporated as part of, it needs to be incorporated as part of the lifeblood of an organization.